What's up, folks? Spiderfly back again on the World Wide Web. Who's got two thumbs and just figured out how to record in landscape? This guy right here. Yeah, we're back. It's been a while since I shot the last few videos. Actually, since I shot them last. The game's out. It's in stores. You can buy it with real money. And it probably looks better than this version because I still have not gotten the real copies. I'm still using the test one. You can have a better one than me if you want it. You won't be able to get it on Drive-Thru RPG because of corporate back-end deals, which I'm not really a part of. But I'm going to try and get the DLC up there, or the expansion, I guess, whatever you want to call it. It's not a video game, so I guess technically it's not DLC. But gonna get that up as soon as possible on Drive-Thru. You can already get it now on my site. That's www.spidereyes.net. But yeah, we're here into the next video. We're gonna be skipping over the real deal section 3 because that's just perks. I can maybe give some thoughts at the end of the video about how I feel about perks, rebalances, changes, adding your own, that kind of thing. But this video is going to be on section 4, protect your neck. It is the section that is all about... I can't record a single video on base, can I? You can be in here if you can be quiet. You just gotta be quiet. Alright, fine. Come on. Come on, get up. Oh my god, I gotta do everything. There, set him down right here. This is the section which is about your hit points and keeping your character alive. What does that look like in Ghetto Rats? How's that going to play out at the table? Let's find out now! Yeah. Okay, so unlike in most TTRPGs where you might have, your hit points, some of them have been using like exhaustion and stuff like that. Most of them have 1, maybe 2. Ghetto Rats has 4 because that is just the kind of game that this is. But what are the 4 hit points? The 4 types of health, I guess you can call them. How do they work? Well, yeah, that's what this video is about. Hooray! So first things first. In the game we call them the 4 humors. They're kind of more like 4.5, I guess. But yeah, the 4 humors. It's catchy. It fits. What are they? So the first one on our list, we've got blood. What is blood? Blood is basically just your character's hit points. It works really similar to how it would in traditional TTRPGs. You take damage, you lose blood. Blood is just a tracker of how much damage you can take before you go down. Really simple, really nothing that advanced. Not really reinventing the wheel. And you can increase your max blood by buying 2 points in which stat? Comment below if you remember. The next type of health in Ghetto Rats is one that's called trauma. So trauma tracks your character's resistance to injuries. If blood is, just your hit points, taking, abstract amounts of damage, trauma is about like serious injuries, broken legs, missing arms, punctured lungs, gouged out eyes, all of those great things that you don't want to happen to you. The rule for trauma, every character at the base of the game generally has a max threshold of 10 trauma, 10 points worth of injuries they can take before they're down, regardless of how much blood you have. If you go to 0 blood, you're down. If you max out your trauma, you're down. Your max trauma can be decreased if you have to, sell a kidney to pay your rent, or if you modify your body with a bunch of awful mechanical augments, or there's one where you swallow a demon core. You can do that. Anything like that is going to decrease your maximum amount of trauma. But what is trauma itself? Every time you lose 10 blood at once, or more, or whatever, you take a point of trauma. So it's for every 10 damage, you take an injury. So if you lose 9 blood and then you lose 8 blood, you don't take a trauma. Those are sort of, you can call them flesh wounds or whatever you want to say. But if you lost 11 blood, that would be 1 trauma. If you lost 23 blood, that would be 2 trauma. The cosmetics of trauma is really up to you and the Zone Master. It's kind of just about what fits. And that's kind of what's so handy about it at the table is, the game used to have like a limb targeting system, sort of like VATS in Fallout, where all your attacks were, how difficult they were, how much damage they did, all depended on where you were targeting. And it got really tedious. Like, you're tracking something like a fist fight, you want to say I punched somebody in the face. That sounds great on paper until it's like, oh, well, a headshot has -4 accuracy, and then you're doing triple damage. It just got kind of ridiculous. Trauma really helps kind of like, if you take a ton of damage, you are injured. You're not just walking it off. You're not just shrugging it off. But what that injury actually looks like is really up to you. If you take 34 damage and take 3 trauma all at once, maybe you got shot in the head, maybe you got like an axe blade sticking out of your skull if you're still alive, but you took all that. Maybe 2 trauma, you get shot in the knee and you're limping or something like that. The fun part is, any injury, it's going to make sense with trauma, because what trauma does ultimately is a -1 to all skill checks for every point of trauma. So you're not just shrugging off. I mean, you see that a lot in certain games where it's like you're at 1 HP and you're still operating at full capacity, and then you get poked and you're dead instantly. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, which is fine, for certain games. But then you kind of have the other thing, which I personally think is even worse, where it's like, okay, now you're rolling with disadvantage when below half your max HP, and then below your max 25 HP, then you have these penalties. No one wants to keep track of that. That's super annoying. So anytime you take more than 10 damage, you just, add right here. Whose character sheet is this? Longest surviving character in the campaign I'm running, by the way. But if you track it here, you can go, trauma. I took 10 damage, mark it down, 1 point of trauma. I took 30, 3 points of trauma. And once you max it out, you're down. Same as if you have blood. You're probably wondering why I've emphasized that so much. Usually, during the beginning of the game, you're going to have a way higher trauma threshold than you will have max blood. You start with 30 out of 30 blood, 0 out of 10 trauma. You're going to be down way before you take 10 trauma worth of damage, but, if you're a bio-breaker, you want to augment your character really extensively, it's going to mean that crits way more likely to down you. Certain weapons, like, a lot of the 2-2-3 weapons do double trauma. Certain melee weapons do double trauma. Those become really terrifying against augmented characters. Things like that. If you have a person who has like 180 max blood and you're like, there's no way I can do that much damage, sometimes targeting them with really specific injuries as opposed to just trying to whittle down their health pool is going to be the better approach. So they kind of have this balance of, like, at the beginning of the game, you can take way more injuries than you can damage. Later on in the game, it kind of reverses. Okay, so we talked about blood, which is your HP. We talked about trauma, which is an abstract measurement of your injuries. Next, we're going to talk about condition. Now, condition is, if blood is like your health points and trauma is your injuries, then condition is more like your character's health in terms of, like, are you getting enough vitamins? Have you been, out in the sun? Are you eating enough? Are you sleeping enough? Are you hydrated? It's kind of like your character, how well is your character taking care of themselves? The more points in, remember, every 2 points of muscle, you get +1 max condition. So the more in shape your character is, the higher their kind of resistance to things like starving or illness and stuff like that, which is good. And condition is kind of, yeah, it's kind of your buffer against things like disease. But within the world of ghetto rats, health, how we look at it today, being healthy, looks a little bit different. It says in the book that the majority of people, kind of within the canon of the game, because of the ghost radiation, which we'll talk about more in the magic video, the average person, very irradiated. The landscape, incredibly polluted. Things like even the idea of pollution and like waste disposal and stuff really is a thing of the past, because the planet has become so ruined that no one really cares to try and reverse it at this point. They all kind of see it as a lost cause, the rotten world, right? So the general rule of thumb is every single person on Earth by their 18th birthday has probably had at least one major surgery or organ transplant, because otherwise you would be dead. Your organs are so just kind of ruined with radiation and pollution, and probably a lot of microplastics, that you would just die. There really is no chance of survival without the big organ harvesting complex. Without big organ, you wouldn't be getting by. So everybody is dependent on these transplants. But where do we source all those organs? The majority of the cheap ones are going to come through chimera pigs or kim pigs, chimera pig, I guess probably some people would pronounce it. I don't. But yeah, pigs are going to be used to harvest. Fun fact, a pig can get to be as much as, I think it was like 48.9% human parts before it's sort of considered a human. If you think slaughtering pigs that are 48% human sounds like a horrible job, you're right, it is. We'll get into that later. But everybody's dependent on these transplants. Rich people are going to get them maybe vat grown or kind of more traditional like cybernetic organs and augments and stuff like that. Some of them are going to be stolen from other people and resold on the market for really cheap. But the idea essentially is that your character is a mishmash of kind of scavenged parts. A lot of them are going to be in the zone. They're going to be black market source. A lot of them might be expired or defective or dubiously acquired, but you have to take what you can get. And the benefit to this is most diseases and ailments of our time, and even the particularly deadly bioplagues, which killed off the majority of the human race during the Ghost War, pretty much all of those are treatable. And theoretically, you could live to be hundreds of years old in this world if you had the money and resources to keep swapping organs, which is partly why kind of your trauma cap is so high. The average person, like what we today would consider a fatal injury or, a lifelong, like the idea like maybe you get hit by a car, you're in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. That wouldn't really happen in this world if you could afford to get that fixed. And kind of the one silver lining is that it's actually quite affordable, relatively, especially if you're from the US. This would be like cheaper probably than what you guys are used to. But the downside is that, like all great businesses, organs have a shelf life. They have a planned obsolescence. Your organs that you've paid thousands of dollars that you don't have for because you're living in the zone, they're going to expire. So every few years, once you're an adult, swapping out parts. Why is that relevant? Well, it's relevant when we get to the idea of the caloric deficit. So, your condition, tracking your health, things like disease or, a twister bite, certain spells, exhausting yourself, pushing your body further than, it's supposed to be pushed. All of these things are going to reduce your condition, and doing things like eating are going to help boost it back up. Certain things like antibiotics are going to help you do that. Maybe even like if you want to get super simulationist, like washing and stuff like that. But that's the kind of health that condition tracks. Once your condition falls to 0, you are not downed. Unlike blood and trauma, you don't just go down, and we'll get to what being downed is in a second. But you roll on the scar table. We have a bunch of those. The one that's relevant to this, though, is mutation. Mutations are what happens when your organs start to fail. So your organs, your advanced organs, are powered mostly by food or body heat and stuff like that. If you are not eating enough, or if you push your body too far, all of those horrible illnesses that your organs are engineered to be resistant to, they're going to catch up with you. And once you haven't got enough calories, you're not taking good enough care of yourself, these fancy organs are going to fail. And when that happens, when it falls to 0, you roll for a mutation. So let's say, oh no, I'm at 0 con. In the middle of combat, I roll an 8 on this table. I've gotten the twitch. Your nerves are beginning to decay. Your body shakes constantly like a guilty man awaiting at the gallows. This will give me a minus d6 to my weapons handling, in this case -3, until I get another organ transplant. The other thing with condition, this is, I guess, also kind of lore. The whole rationale behind why blades can hack people's bodies is because of exploits in these cheap organs. They probably have little processors, like diagnostic chips almost, that can kind of give you almost like a firmware update of like, oh yeah, you're suffering from kidney failure. Go to a doctor and replace it. Which is kind of the idea of why you can hack people and do such horrible things, is every person alive is a mishmash of these horrific bootleg parts. But that's condition. Eat food, don't get mutated. Oh yeah, and the other rule is for starving. Once your condition has reached 0, every time you lose condition while at 0 con, you just take 2 trauma. This is from starvation or organ failure or whatever you want to call it. So once it falls to 0, you roll your mutation. Every other time that you continue losing condition while at 0, you take 2 trauma. Just outright. And so it can be really good against super scary enemies. If you're up against an enemy with a low maximum condition and you have spells or, hacks that can reduce it, you can just start dealing trauma without even directly attacking them. But the same is true for you. Okay, so we talked about all the different things: blood, trauma, condition. Lastly, we've got stress. So stress is a measurement of your character's mental health. You're starting to see that a lot in games these days. It's not as unique maybe as when I was first writing this several years ago. But stress is tracking your character's kind of psyche, your resilience to the horrors of the world, and a horrific world it is. You're not just an average Jane or John Doe in the zone. You are usually going to be playing as some kind of mercenary, a career criminal, maybe just a petty crook trying to get rent money. It doesn't really matter. You're going to be doing pretty morally dubious things on a pretty regular basis, and it's going to take a toll on your character. You're not Rambo. You're not John Wick. You are just another ghetto rat. It's not looking great for you. And so stress is kind of tracking like how you feel about the things you're doing. For every 2 points in grit, it goes up. If you're a really gritty character, it might not bother you as much, or you might be more resilient to the horrific things that you are doing. But for the average person, it's going to take a toll on them. So as stress goes up, your character's getting more noticeably paranoid, maybe having nightmares. If you're kind of leaning more into the roleplay side of it, you are feeling your guilt, you are feeling that stress ratchet up. It's getting harder to breathe, harder to just kind of function. Once you have maxed out your stress cap, you roll for a psych scar. Psychological scars, unlike regular scars, which I'll get to when we talk about getting downed, or mutations, they are only a -1 to whatever stat you roll. So you'll remember a mutation, whatever you roll, it's a minus d6 to that stat until you repair the organ. For a psych scar, when you max out your stress, it's only a -1, but that -1 is permanent. It does not go away. You cannot get rid of it. So taking psych scars is pretty rough. So let's say I max out my stress, 2d6, I rolled a 7. If you roll a 7 or 11 on a scar table, you don't take a scar, so that would be really lucky. But on this one, I rolled a 9. So a 9 for the psych scar is paranoid, -1 personality. And it's kind of leaning into this idea that the more traumatized, like taking a psych scar is representing your character being like traumatized by an experience, seeing or doing something so horrific that they will never be the same again. And so those -1s being permanent on your stats are showing that, you know, you are stunted a bit by these horrific things. You're not just going to become a stronger person for persevering through them. You are going to have to deal with the, you know, mental fallout of this for the rest of your character's probably pretty short life. It's kind of mainly a way to punish. There's a lot of systems in this game that kind of punish like murder hobo behavior. This is one of the big ones, is giving out stress. If your PCs are doing really horrific stuff all the time, give them stress, and it kind of forces them to engage in the more unsavory parts of this world. How do you get rid of stress? It's usually going to be becoming addicted, so it could be taking drugs, gambling. Sometimes food will help, but only for so long, and it kind of shows the degradation or deterioration, of your character's mental well-being over time. Once you are over your stress cap, the whole time you're over, you are panicked. What is panic? Panic is just essentially disadvantage. So any skill check you make while your stress is at or over its capacity, you're rolling twice and taking the lower result. Being panicked is bad. That panic goes away once your stress returns to normal levels. So finally, we're going to talk about being downed. Once your blood has hit 0, or your trauma has maxed out or gone over the maximum, you have to roll your cheat death. And what gives you cheat death? Remember, every 2 points in personality, you get a +1 to this, but your trauma is still going to count against it. So let's roll a d6. I've taken 6 trauma. Let's say I have 2 personalities, so I've got a +1 to cheat death for my personality, for my 2 personality, and I've got a -6 because I'm at 6 trauma. I would roll my cheat death. In this case, it would be a horrible, catastrophic failure, and I would be dead. But let's say I passed the skill check. Now what happens? When you pass cheat death, you're still at 0 blood. You still can't really do anything. The first thing we're going to do is roll for a scar. So 2d6 for a physical scar. I've rolled a 6, which is missing eye, -2 street smarts. And I'll get to that in a second. Physical scars, you can get removed with surgery. Mutations, you can get rid of with organ transplants. Psych scars, you cannot get rid of. Those are permanent. So once you're downed, usually we kind of treat it as like you are alive, but you can't do anything. You can maybe talk or something like that, but you're not making any skill checks while you're downed. If you have some allies that can apply first aid, give you some blood, get rid of some trauma, you can immediately get back into the action. There's no recovery time. It's just once you get back to like 1 blood, you can keep going. It's risky to do that though, because if you get downed again, another scar, it can be pretty rough and it can spiral out pretty bad. Unlike something like D&D, you don't get multiple attempts with your cheat death. It is one roll. You can still, spend zeal on it and stuff like that. But if your character goes down, there's a solid chance they're not getting back up. You're kind of just as likely to succeed, depends on the severity of the injuries, but it's kind of just, up to one skill check, which kind of leans into the more roguelite nature of the game. Characters die pretty quick. It doesn't take a lot. Sometimes they'll last for a whole campaign. Sometimes they won't last one session. That's just kind of the nature of the game. So we talked about scars, we talked about mutations, we talked about psychological scars, being downed. The one other thing I forgot to mention for trauma is blood loss. So basically the rule is whenever you're resting, for every trauma you have, you take D6 blood loss. That's essentially if you go to sleep with untreated injuries, you're gonna die. You're gonna bleed out. It's whenever you're resting, because tracking it by the hour and stuff like that is super annoying. Like, if you survive a combat and then just have to drive to the doctor's office, but it's in the next neighborhood, and it's like, oh, I'll be dead before I get there. That's not fun. No one likes that. So it's just whenever you're resting. There is a rule in the game where you can counteract 1d6 of blood loss by spending one condition. And that's kind of just to represent your wounds getting infected, scabbing over, maybe being septic, which isn't great. It's not going to last you very long. If you think that's too forgiving, you can just say you can spend condition like normal to roll blood and hope it counteracts the blood loss. I just find it's kind of annoying to be like, okay, I'm going to recover 5d6 blood and then I'm going to lose 3d6 blood. It's kind of easier to be like, I have 3 trauma. I'm going to spend 3 con to not bleed to death. Keep it nice and simple. But yeah, I think that's the whole chapter. Like, this chapter is pretty straightforward. There's a stress table for, kind of how we recommend giving out stress. Temporary trauma is, if you're in like poison gas or if you're drowning or being asphyxiated, your trauma might go up, but then once the source that's causing that trauma goes away, the trauma is going to go away. So that's pretty straightforward. Oh yeah, I guess the other thing in this chapter is resting. So whenever your character rests, which is sort of, sleeping, generally it's sleeping, you spend a minimum of 1 condition. You lose 1 condition every time you rest and recover d6 blood. You can spend additional condition to recover more blood. So if you rest, you say, I'm going to spend 3 condition, you recover 3d6 blood. That's just your character kind of sleeping off injuries. You cannot sleep off trauma. You need medical supplies or medical attention to get rid of it. There's some spells that help with that kind of thing too. All the rules for resting kind of fall more into like housing. If you're sleeping on the street, you might lose 2 condition and then take a stress. Yeah, but I mean, this chapter really is pretty straightforward. It's just your health pools. There's a lot of them, but once you kind of get into the feel of the game, really your vitals going up and down is 90% of the gameplay. Low key, if you kind of take a step back, you earn money to keep your condition up and your stress down. You spend money after combats to recover your blood and your trauma. You're tracking all these things during combats to try and keep afloat. The game at its core is a survival game, right? So making sure that you're ensuring all your characters' needs are met is kind of the early gameplay. But yeah, I don't know. This is one of those videos which is definitely probably going to be less helpful than just reading the book. I hope my clarifications made sense. They probably didn't a whole lot. I was kind of just rambling this whole time. I hope it was kind of clear. Yeah, reading this chapter, it's like a few pages. You're probably going to get more out of just reading it. But if you don't want to pick up the book, hopefully this helped. All these tables, I'll probably have to include in the handout actually, because we end up referencing this page a lot. Yeah, the main kind of purpose of all of these is just to hammer down on that premise that your character is not invincible. Your character is not even particularly powerful. Like, obviously shrugging off gunshot wounds and stuff like that is impressive to us, but even in the world of Ghetto Rats, like, you can survive being shot pretty feasibly. Being stabbed is like a monthly occurrence for a lot of people, just, you know, that aren't even criminals in this world. Just it's kind of a rough place in the zone, right? So you can survive almost any injury if you can get out of there and not die on the spot, and more importantly, if you've got the money to replace those parts. A lot of people end up in debt. You know, loan sharking is a pretty big business just because everybody needs those organ transplants, no matter who you are. And if you can't afford them, you don't have a choice. You don't get to opt out. You know, it's not like, oh, I don't want to take out a $5,000 loan from that guy. You're going to die if you don't. You know, you need new kidneys. That's you know, not up for debate. It kind of leans into a bit more of a, I think that's kind of an important thing I do want to touch on a bit, is like, I find a lot of cyberpunk stuff is pretty anti-transhumanism. And the stance of the game isn't to say you should not modify your body. I kind of see that. I don't think it's intentional, but I think a lot of cyberpunk media, like Shadowrun with Essence or Cyberpunk with Empathy, not to say those are bad systems or anything like that, but it kind of has an underlying narrative of like, you shouldn't modify your body. Your body's natural. You shouldn't change it. This is how you're meant to be. And obviously, you know, you shouldn't. The theme is more that you shouldn't have to be modifying your body if you don't want to. I think that's kind of more the theme of why these organ transplants are portrayed, and biomechs and stuff are portrayed as so horrible. Because cosmetic surgeries in this world are super affordable, really easy to perform, and would be pretty routine. Like, most people wouldn't really bat an eye at them. If you want to have like turquoise skin and pure red eyes, that, you know, people might be like, oh, that's weird, but it wouldn't be that different from like a tattoo or something like that. It's more the fact that you have to routinely pay large corporations to update your body's systems to prevent from dying from pollution caused by usually those same entities, or from post-war radiation, which is just rampant and everywhere. That's more the tone. It isn't to say you shouldn't modify your body if you want to, but in this world, the choice has kind of been made for you, which is why it's horrific, and which is why when we get to biomechs, you're going to see a lot more of the body horror this game has to offer. But yeah, hope that covers everything. Hope that made sense. Hope I wasn't rambling too long. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.